So I'd like to start by introducing our panel today. Again, I'm Mark Arnold. I'm the Director of Business Development for C&P, and I'll be the moderator. Joining us is Jeremy Benoit. Jeremy's the VP of Solutions and Services with C&P. He literally brings a few decades of experience in the IT infrastructure space. His experience spans end-user applications, data center infrastructure, security and data protection, and internally, if you're a customer of C&P, you probably have engaged with Jeremy at some point during your time as a customer. Also with us today is David Turton. David is a very seasoned systems engineer and SE leader with extensive experience in data protection, storage, and cloud technologies, all of which are going to be relevant to our discussion today. He brings over 2 decades of experience in this data protection space with EMC, then Dell EMC after the merger, and most recently, David serves, excuse me, as the Director of Sales Engineering for Druba's Global Channel Alliances and Managed Services Providers. And then also on the line today for a little bit of an interesting twist, we have Reeves Zaytoun, who comes to us from Sentinel Risk Advisors. Reeves leads their cyber and technology insurance lines for their customers. He had a stint in the IT space for a number of years, and then he moved over to Sentinel a few years back. And he's going to bring a perspective to our discussion today, really from the insurer perspective. So delighted to have all of my panelists with us today. So regarding our agenda today, we're going to just cover at a high level the topics we're going to hit. Why do you need to protect Microsoft 365 data? We're going to certainly be drilling into what the cyber insurers recommend and requirements they have for policies. We're going to address what experts have to say in general about data protection. Since there's a big movement to SaaS for backup and data protection, we're going to be exploring why companies are moving to SaaS solutions for backup. And then at the end, we'll just talk about some areas where we recommend you might get started and how C&P can help. So again, I want to encourage you guys to ask any questions you have in the chat there. If you have any technical issues or problems, you can go to the chat. I'm sorry, I meant the Q&A. You can go in the chat and post that, and Denise Hatton, our host, will be serving those up to the panel. So I guess a good starting point here, I'll pose the first question to David Turton and Jeremy. So why do we need to protect Microsoft 365 anyway? Isn't that data already in the cloud?
Yeah, so I'll start us off. Yes, the data is in the cloud, and generally speaking, SaaS platforms like Microsoft 365 are fundamentally a little bit more stable than a server in an IT closet or a self-run data center, if you will. But Microsoft has a policy they call the shared responsibility model, and many SaaS providers do have something similar to this in some way, shape, or form. But essentially, that shared responsibility model says, in short, that you are responsible for protecting your own data. Microsoft is certainly going to make sure that their 365 platform is up and running and alive for you to access it or for your users to access it, but they're not going to make sure that your data is safe or protected from any internal risks, right? Be it accidental deletions, be it any other issues that may go on. So they're going to make sure that environment is up and running and the global user base can use it, but they just don't put any emphasis at all on the individual organization's data. That really is on the individual company to make sure that their data is protected in a manner that they need for their users or compliance purposes.
Yeah, and Jeremy, I'll add a little bit onto that. You hit the nail on the head, the shared responsibility model. And something that Mark said earlier, many companies look at data that's going into Microsoft 365 almost as a tier 1, tier 0 application. So beyond just Exchange. So a lot of customers I've worked with have taken file servers. It'll go to SharePoint Online. Data that used to sit on laptops are now going to OneDrive, or there's collaboration on Teams. And it's important. So beyond just the standard versioning that Microsoft will do for you, a lot of companies from a compliance or regulatory standpoint have defined retention policies, governance that they have to keep data for a longer period of time. So whether it's months or years, that tier 0, tier 1 application has to be kept. So it is important the minute you put data into the cloud, whether it's a SaaS application, whether it's infrastructure as a service or platform as a service, it is your data that you have to make sure that you're protecting. Yeah, good point.
So we're trying to protect data. We're protecting data from data loss. So what are the typical causes of data loss for Microsoft 365? I'll post that out there for Jeremy or David.
Yeah, I'll quickly start off. And unfortunately, it's some type of malware attack, but that's typically what in the news that there's some type of virus, some type of malware that is it just takes one person. We have a case study of one account that one person clicked on the wrong thing, credentials were compromised, and they lost thousands of laptops in the matter of minutes. Unfortunately, when it gets into the laptop, that then gets into OneDrive and SharePoint Online. There are concerns always, as you hear about in the news, that data is going to be impacted by malware or virus.
Yeah, the other one is just the lowest common denominator of every network, right? It's the end user. People are going to make mistakes. We're all human. Even IT experts are good at making mistakes. The user is going to do something they shouldn't, be it click on a link that happens to have some malicious content, or the accidental select all, hit the delete key on the wrong folder. And again, with that shared responsibility model we started out with, that's on the organization to get that back. And you really need a nice, easy platform to get that data back. Otherwise, the user's going to have a bad day.
Yeah, and if I can add on top of that, because you bring up a good point, there's always going to be the operational or accidental deletion that you have to recover from. But more often than not, we're seeing a bad actor, disgruntled employee. So I hate always bringing this up with any customer that I talk to, but it's going to happen that somebody is disgruntled about something. They have elevated permissions. They have access to something. And before they walk out the door, they're unfortunately wanting to do some type of harm, deleting data. You do a Google search, you'll find plenty of stories on that. So there are the malicious threats from an internal actor that customers do have to be aware of.
Okay, so lots of potential sources for data loss with either internal or external threats. We've talked about the array of things that now could live in Microsoft 365, things that could live in Teams or SharePoint or OneDrive, and how more and more that's become mission critical data for customers. So that kind of leads us to the need to protect that data and have a backup solution that protects that data. So I guess I'll start with David Turton on this one. David, what in general do experts in the industry recommend around data protection, just generically?
Yeah, a lot of times we're hearing, and definitely would love to get Reeves' view on this from a cyber insurance standpoint. But a lot of times what we're hearing is the immutability or the air gap. So the air gap is a common term where you have some isolation between your production environment and where your backup data is being stored. So you need to make sure that there is that type of isolation. And a lot of times beyond that, they're wanting immutability so that you have safeguards in place so that, as we were talking about earlier, a disgruntled employee, a bad actor, or even an external threat, if they do gain access, they can't make modifications to retention policy. They can't delete backup data. They can't delete your environment as a whole. So those are two, but definitely interested in Bree's view on this as well.
So from this slide, what I'm taking away is offline, air gapped, immutable copies of backup. We'll get into multiple copies maybe in a minute, but so yeah, Reeves, we'd love to hear your view on this about what general recommendation that you guys as an insurer, not a backup vendor or an IT provider like C&P, what general recommendations do cyber insurers have for customers and organizations?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. There are a number of things, a host of things that a cyber carrier is going to look at when they are evaluating the risk of potentially insuring an organization from a cyber liability perspective. To piggyback on what David was saying, the first thing, or one of the first things that we'll look at, that a carrier will look at, is their backup solution. So do you have a backup of your data stored offsite and offline? That's going to tell the carrier that the time from breach to back up and running and operational is shortened, and they're gonna view the risk a little more favorably. But then there are a number of other things that a carrier is going to look at that you see here up on the screen. Multi-factor authentication. A number of our top cyber insurers estimate that probably about 99% of the breaches that they encounter could have been prevented through the use of MFA. Endpoint detection and response is another key tool that a carrier is going to look at, your ability to detect vulnerabilities before a breach. And then lastly, cybersecurity training is really critical to a number of our carriers. In fact, IBM estimates that about 95% of cyber breaches are the result of human error. And so that's a big factor that a carrier is looking at, wanting to make sure that a potential insured has a protocol in place, has training in place to mitigate the risk and make the organization a more favorable insured, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that training is really an important thing because more and more we see the sophistication of how people, the fish testing in particular. I'm probably not the only one on the call today that got multiple emails or texts somewhere during the holidays implying some great windfall of financial gain if I only went and clicked on the link. I thought about it, but I decided against it. Okay, Jeremy, I know we're seeing a pretty big trend across our user base of customers are moving to a software as a service solution for backup and recovery. So we're seeing that trend in the industry, and we're certainly seeing it in our customer base. What are the things that are causing our customers to move to a SaaS-based data protection solution rather than a traditional solution?
Yeah, there's always a variety of factors and reasons that folks make a change in their platforms. I think one of the largest or biggest drivers there is going to be around legacy backup solutions, generally speaking, have a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of systems. There's maybe tapes. There's maybe on-site storage. There's maybe off-site storage. There's just a lot of moving parts. And our mantra and what we're really seeing from a lot of our customers and partners is really trying to drive the risk, cost, and ultimately complexity out of the environment. And so again, the legacy backup solutions do have a lot of complexity. And with that complexity comes risk, generally the cost. So moving to a SaaS platform generally simplifies what the deployment's going to look like for any given customer or environment. SaaS platforms also give some flexibility, right? We all know that there's a bit of a change in the workforce dynamic. There are more folks on the road or working from home. Servers or systems or applications are in more and more places than they ever were. Back when legacy backup systems were in their heyday, the servers were generally in a closet or in a data center. Now they're maybe in a closet or a data center, maybe in some as a service organization, and you just got to have a way to back all that up. So users out and about and mobile, servers and systems that are all over, you just need a system that's flexible enough to deal with that ever-changing landscape and simple enough to be able to manage. And so generally speaking, the SaaS platform gives a nice, easy way. There's a dashboard, web console you can get to from anywhere. You can manage your backups from work from home. You don't have to be in the data center to do it. You can back up those people that are working from home. You can back up systems that are everywhere. So it's really just a matter of the dynamic that the IT world's in with, again, the users and systems all over. SaaS just gives that flexibility that you really need these days to be able to protect your environment.
David Turton, would you add to that?
Yeah, obviously part of the platform that we offer today through CNP is 100% SaaS. There's no software, no hardware to manage. It is secure by design. It was built from the ground up. So if you think about the day-to-day, and Mark, you and I worked together for 10 plus years, selling a lot of software, selling a lot of hardware. Every 3, 5, 7 years, a customer wanted to upgrade to the newest hardware appliance or new software. That's time out of somebody's day where they're having to patch or upgrade or swap out hardware or figure out what cloud they're going to write the data to. With this type of SaaS platform, it literally is turnkey. They have to log into a web browser, into a console, and they can manage the environment securely. They're really looking for the simplicity of the platform, the security of the platform, and the scalability so that they're not having to add more, as Jeremy was talking about, tape drives or hardware to write the backup to. You're leveraging the infinite scale of the cloud to grow into it. And more important is some of the aspects of as new features are released, they just automatically become available for all customers, especially around the security side. And what Reeves was talking about with multi-factor from a security standpoint, that's something that we require day one for people to log into their console is they do have to leverage multi-factor.
So, David, I mean, we've covered great ground up to now generically about the importance of data protection for Microsoft 365 and the threats that customers can deal with and a variety of topics there. So the industry's moving to SaaS. We're certainly seeing that from a Druva vendor perspective. So what differentiates Druva from other SaaS platforms that are available in the market?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, we were really built as a SaaS platform from day one. So we're not taking something that was on-prem years and years ago and try to refactor that to run in the cloud. So we scaled out as a true SaaS platform many years ago, 2008, 2009, to build that out. As you can see here, over 450 petabytes under management today. The fact that we're running 14, 15 million backup restored jobs every single day means that we have the scale to handle it. And it's all dynamically managed, so it auto scales based off of the need of customers. There's a lot of things that benefit customers. Security was released about 3.5 years ago as a feature. So there's some foundational security features. There's some core features, some advanced features that we have as part of the platform. It's like any SaaS service that you're doing today for music or movies. As you want more, it's just turning a switch. You're not having to upgrade. So very flexible in the way that we can scale.
Thank you, David. So I know our conversation today is really focused around Microsoft 365 and that important data, but while we're just talking about Druva and the SaaS platform, so what other workloads can users look to protect with this platform?
Yeah, I often say it's from edge to core to cloud. So edge meaning desktop laptops. We work with a lot of companies that have remote employees, and we know there's policies in place where they do want to leverage Microsoft 365 services. We have quite a few companies that development actually happens on the laptop. So gaming developers or other developers, that is all going to happen locally. So making sure that data is being protected. So within a data center or your closet that you have all your infrastructure that you're running your business on, we can protect that as well. We're seeing this transition from a hybrid model where you have some data on-prem, some data running in any of the large cloud providers like AWS or Azure. Those hyperscalers, as Jeremy talked about before, the shared responsibility. There's a lot of different things that we can do. Again, from edge to core to cloud, we can protect it all and protect it all under a single console. So you're not having different systems, different platforms managing different parts of your environment. We can do it all.
That's awesome. I appreciate that, David. You mentioned, and you've got listed on this slide, Microsoft Entra ID. Why is protecting Entra ID important to customers?
Yeah, Entra ID or Azure AD, it was formerly known, is important because it has a lot of critical information, details about users, details about groups, permissions, everything about a customer's environment and their employees and what they're doing is really built into Entra ID. A lot of times what we see from any type of external threat trying to get into any type of company's environment, the main areas that they're focusing on going after is their backup infrastructure and then Active Directory or Entra ID, because those are, if you can get after Entra ID and Active Directory, you can cause a lot of havoc. If you can get into the backup environment, obviously you can't restore, and a customer is impacted about how they're going to get their data back. But yeah, Entra ID, that is extremely important. The benefit of our platform is this is provided as a free service. So if you're protecting Microsoft 365 or anything that you see here on the screen, Entra ID is a free service that we add as part of that.
That's very cool. I know that's a recent addition to the Druva platform this past year, so that's really helping customers out. I just take a quick mental break here. We're getting down to the last part of our discussion today. I've checked. I don't see any questions in the chat or the Q&A thus far, so I'll encourage you, if you have questions, just go down there and click on that link and serve them up. We'd love to have them. We will do a pause here at the end to see if there's any questions, but ask away if you have them. So I'm going to switch back to our insurance perspective here for a minute with Reeves. So Reeves, we talked a little bit about general recommendations from an insurance industry perspective, but what I'd like you to address next are the specific requirements that you see insurers have for customers that are getting a cyber or technology line added to a policy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark. There are a couple of things. Cyber liability and more other specialty lines of insurance coverage require a little bit more of a heavy lift up front on the potential insured's part. What that means is completion of an application, which is really designed to assess the nature of the business operations, assess the record count, records being processed, as well as the cybersecurity controls that are in place and insured's cybersecurity posture. And a couple of things that they're looking at specifically when completing that application I mentioned earlier. They're going to be specifically honed in on making sure multi-factor authentication is in place. That's basically a non-starter for most all cyber carriers at this point if that's not in place. Again, endpoint detection and response and the backup solution that we talked about earlier. They're really going to be looking for pretty robust solutions around these three areas. And if an insured doesn't, or a potential insured doesn't have these things in place, limits are going to be more minimal, as well as premiums you encounter are going to be quite a bit higher just due to the nature of the risk. And then the last piece, the last requirement, the last thing that a carrier will do when assessing the risk is conduct a scan of the insured's network, or the potential insured's network. Make sure that they don't identify anything, any open ports, things of that nature that could potentially lead to a breach down the line up front. Those are the couple of things that an insurer is going to run through prior to offering coverage, and the things that will impact what kind of coverage and what kind of premium prospective organizations paying.
Thank you, Reese. I'm sorry, we finally got some questions in the chat there. So while you were explaining that, I was looking at our questions here. So we have a couple. I think the first one maybe I'll pose to David Turton. So if a customer is looking to diversify their AWS footprint, how do we leverage other cloud providers?
Yeah, so I'll get a little bit into our roadmap. So today, our environment is built on AWS, but the fact is we're not writing it to the same region, the same availability zone. You can pick which one. So we have 20 different 20 different regions that you can write to. To get into a little bit of our roadmap, we are going to extend that out. So hopefully I don't get in trouble saying too much about that, but there are plans because to Taylor's question, there are customers that are in AWS that want to have their data in Azure, or they're in Azure and they want to have their data in AWS. So we are moving very quickly towards this true multi-cloud environment. Yeah, great question.
We certainly didn't plan to get down in a very deep technical discussion, David, but you just touched on one thing. Maybe we'll spend 30 seconds and answer. So you talked about being able to pick one of the 20 availability zones in AWS that you can write your data to. So within that availability zone, are there multiple copies of the customer's data?
There are, yeah. So anytime we turn up inside of an AWS region, and it'll be the same for Azure when we do it, we're going to go into multiple availability zones. So all data is automatically, we have 3 copies of it. So if there's one issue, similar to what we were talking about earlier, so shared responsibility model. If there's an issue in one region, one availability zone, you're going to be separated by up to, I think it's 60 miles for other availability zones. So we're always going to have 3 copies of your data. Yeah.
Cool. There's a couple more questions. I'm going to defer on those until after we finish up one more slide here. Let's see. Actually, I'm sorry, changing my tune there. So Reeves talked about being able to quickly restore data, get back to your operational readiness stage. So in the event of a ransomware attack, how does Druva help us get back to pre-attack state of business?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that we do as part of our platform. So I mentioned earlier, there's some foundational services that Druva has. One is looking over. One key point is we can never see any customer data. So data is always encrypted at flight, encrypted at rest. The only way to see customer data is logging into a customer's console so that you can actually see what's being protected and what's available to restore. But we're looking for, across our platform, we're looking for anomalies. And then also we have some things in place. We do have immutability. So that data lock feature that we were talking about earlier is making sure that you have that. We do have the capability to make sure your backups are immutable. And you can pick and choose what you want to make immutable and what you don't want to make immutable. We have looking for data anomalies. So if certain, say, OneDrive has a large spike in new files or change files, that's going to trigger an event, and we can take it beyond that, how we can quarantine things. If things are accidentally deleted, we have the ability to roll that back so it goes into a recycle bin. We want to make sure that the safeguards are in place, including if you do detect something's going on in an environment. So OneDrive, for example, you can do what's called a curated snapshot. So we can look over, say, the last 15, 30 days and find the last good version of every file. We'll scan that before that golden snapshot is presented back to you. So a lot of safeguards as to what we do as part of that. And if a customer is impacted, our team wants to get involved, as well as CNP, to find out what do you want to recover, because more often than not, it's not just security or IT that's involved as part of a ransomware attack or malware attack. There's other groups that have to be involved for decisions.
Great. Just jumping ahead, but we are going to do a follow-up session where we're going to discuss ransomware attacks and cyber attacks and recovery in much greater detail. So more on that in just a minute. We are at the top of the hour. I've got just a couple more minutes here. We'll wrap it up and cover any more questions that you all might have in our added time. So Jeremy, I'll pose this one to you. Customers on the line that have been listening, where should they get started? How can CNP help them get started? And let's just go with that.
Yeah, generally speaking, the best way to make sure we get you the right solution is take a look at your environment today, right? If we're not an integral part of your IT organization today, then let us schedule some time to come in and talk to you about your infrastructure, your environment, talk a little bit about any policies that we need to stay in compliance with, or any compliances that you need to stay inside the framework of. That really boils down to let us come in and talk to you and do a bit of an assessment of your environment, what your needs are, maybe what solutions you have today that either are not fitting the bill or a little bit more complex than you want them. So it generally all starts with an assessment. Let us take a look at what you've got, where you want to go, and we'll build out a roadmap with the folks at Druva to really help you get there. And whatever that may mean, right? There's the beauty of backup is we want to protect your entire environment. So generally means we get to start talking about lots of parts and pieces of your environment. And all of that matters to protecting your organization. So that while we may start with backup and an assessment on backup, it could lead to any number of infrastructure discussions. So it all starts with an assessment.
Yeah, Mark, if I can add, because I think that's important. So an assessment is not necessarily just IT or security. Oftentimes we're talking to HR, legal, so what we would call a tabletop exercise. So as part of the security conversation that we're scheduling or planning would be who else needs to be involved. So it is beyond just the IT or security team. I'm not sure who's on the call today, but beyond just the traditional information technology folks, there are a lot of others, people that need to make those decisions around the security of any customer's environment.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate those answers. So hopefully we've piqued your interest today on the topic in general. We've tried to provide some discussion from a couple of angles: technology, CNP, an OEM with Druva, our solution provider for SaaS backup, Rees from the insurer's perspective, because all of these things tend to intertwine together in our view. So if you want more information, if you want more detailed information specifically about that, as Jeremy said, for us, it really starts with a high-level discussion to assess what you're trying to accomplish. We can get into great technical, much more technical detailed sessions around what Druva can do for you, the different options that we have there, and certainly help you promote your business, show you the product in a full-featured demo. Not really time to do that and have this panel discussion all in the same half hour today, but we'd love to do that for you all the way through, starting you off with a proof of concept on a segment of workloads to give you a feel for how well it can work. With that, just a little commercial message here. We certainly feel like this has been a very powerful solution and game changer for CNP and our customers. The deployment model, as little as 5 minutes, that might be a little bit aggressive, but it's certainly not the old days of ordering equipment, racking and stacking, deploying software, updating the patches right out of the box. We literally can have customers going, same day. So it's a very quick solution. We've talked at high levels about the built-in security, the recommended offsite air gap immutability of a data protection solution for customers. We've talked about high level the fast cyber response and recovery, which is more and more critical to customers as these ransomware and cyber events just continue to proliferate. What we haven't talked a lot about is cost and how we're seeing customers save up to 40% in their total cost of ownership compared to legacy solutions. So we're really bullish on this solution and what it's able to do for customers. We've already got a few dozen customers that we've migrated, and we're seeing great success. And many of them like it so well from where they start that they're expanding it to other workloads. And so, of course, we'd love to have that opportunity to help you out and fit your business needs. If there's any other questions now, I'll check the chat, but I think we've answered the questions that are out there. While I take a look there, Denise, if you can look, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty getting down to my menu. There it is.
Yep. Mark, we do have a question from someone who wants to talk about adding a Druva solution for their business and what should they do next?
Just reach out to your account rep at C&P or reach out to us generically, and we would be delighted to schedule time, as Jeremy mentioned, to look at your business, do an assessment level discussion of what you're trying to accomplish, and we'd certainly schedule further presentations or demos tailored to what it is you are looking to accomplish.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah, I was just going to say here as we wrap up, appreciate your time joining us today. Hopefully you found value in this. We do have some upcoming webinars that we're planning, and we'd love to hear from you about topics or specific things that would be of value to your company. What we've planned next is a follow-on to this on February 20th at the same 12:30 time slot is specifically around ransomware recovery and strategies to reclaim and secure your data. It'll really be an extension of this conversation and a much deeper dive into the ransomware recoverability features that we have available. And then following in March, we'll be continuing the series with a discussion about strategies for updating legacy data backups that we've done for other customers. If you have specific topics, again, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to get more information about this or want to schedule some time for us just to discuss your environment at a high level, please reach out to us. And with that, we'll just thank you all for attending today. We'll look forward to seeing you again in the near future, and don't hesitate to reach out.